Wait, go back. That was such a good topic. Please.
Okay, so we're going back to the original Constitution, defense, money, diplomacy, and to prevent infringement of individual rights. Now, the way they word that now about fractions, that leads you to believe like, the crazy people that, want to rise against the government. But that's not true. That's why we have our Second Amendment right. It was set up where it's like in the old days, if you had 20, 30 acres, let's just say, and your neighbor had 20, 30 acres, and you call the government, the sheriff, the marshal, whoever, say, hey, my neighbor's killing pigs every day on his farm. I don't like it. They come out and be like, well, they're not hurting you. You just don't like it. There ain't nothing we can do about it. Leave us alone. But if you call and say, hey, every day he's shooting his rifle toward our house and hitting our house, and here's the bullet holes, then they go to your neighbor and be like, hey, you're infringing on her rights to live, survive, live in peace. You can't shoot your gun toward her house. That was the original role. It was also to keep enemies from invading America. It was also to keep foreign people, the non-U.S. citizens, away from America and our life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? And that's why I know this sounds crazy, and a lot of people hate me for it, but if they would write an abortion amendment where it was just like, hey, the federal government is getting out of abortion. It's just between the lady, her God, her husband, or her not husband, and her doctor. That's a constitutional argument that I don't have a problem with, because it's none of my business what you do. But when they write the laws like they do, where it's like 13-year-olds can have an abortion without parental consent, or a 15-year-old can walk into the clinic at school and get an abortion pill the day after pill, right? And the mom and dad have no right, no say, and they write it where it's like, the baby's head can be coming out, and we'll do a late-term abortion. The way they write it where as a Christian and a father, I have to say, no, there's no way, I can't vote for this. I can't stand before God and vote for this. So that's why I always vote against it.
The baby's rights?
Well, okay, that's a weird situation, because constitutionally, and this is the separation of church and state, right? This is how it could get very hairy. So according to God's law, God says, I knew you before I needed you in the womb. I counted the hairs on your head. I know your days, right? I formed you in your mother's womb in the sacred place. So under God's laws, that baby has rights, and it does. But under the Constitution of the United States, that baby is not a citizen of the United States until it's born. We have birth certificates. So unfortunately, the separation of church and state, that baby is the property of the mom carrying it. And that's where it's like, it's such a weird fine line, because the Bible also tells us, though, you obey the man's law unless it violates God's law. So that's kind of the reason, like, we always vote no against abortion. But if it was just cut and dry, it has nothing to do with women's rights. Nobody's trying to take them away from you. And actually, the government should not be in women's rights. They shouldn't be in my rights, though. They shouldn't come on my farm. If you go back to the 4 reasons the government was created, John Adams, the Bill of Rights, all our forefathers, nowhere in there did it say to regulate the will of the people, or to regulate the way people make money, or to regulate and oversee and scrutinize. Nowhere. The government is not supposed to be a regulator. They're supposed to be a protector, a provider, and a defender, which basically all 3 in one. And as long as I'm not in violating your rights, harming you, whatever, the government has nothing to say between me and you. If somebody wanted to ride their horse in a buggy in the old days in the middle of the night with no lights on and run into a ditch, the government's like, well, we just lost another idiot. No big deal. But if you're out riding, shooting, and causing trouble, and you see what I'm saying? Like laws went from like a pure thing to protect people to now to control people. And that's where we're at today in the country. Everything they do is made to control us. They've lost sight of their original task.